Thank you, Sudhin, and thank you, ORF, for inviting me all the way from Chandigarh to Mumbai for this. As the last speaker, I find that much of what I wanted to say has already been dealt with in much detail. But I will nonetheless make those points once more. I want to say firstly that, in India-Pakistan relations, as Sudhindra said, and, I have seen it only through one frame. They are hostages. There is no other way to see them. And I wish that in our language of reporting these things, that we actually stop saying goodwill gesture, reciprocal gesture, because why is it reciprocal at all? It is reciprocal. That reciprocal release of Warsi was not a goodwill gesture. It was actually it was an agreement that when you release Hamid, we will release Warsi. It was that. It was as transactional as that. And we have to stop seeing these things as, what is so humanitarian about releasing him months after he had completed his sentence, or releasing Warsi months after completing? This is all just, to use a word that's very popular, to say humanitarian, it's a jumla. It's not humanitarian. It's an outright violation of law. Somebody finishes their sentence, you better release them and send them back, repatriate them as quickly as possible. As far back as 2011, there was this, the Supreme Court had asked the government, why are you keeping these guys in jail? They've completed their sentence. Somebody had petitioned for 16 people. And, yeah. And why are you keeping them in jail? So the government there, see how cynical and obnoxious this is. Government there is arguing that, no, sir, we can't release now because, we have to wait for Pakistan. 16 prisoners it was, a question of 16 prisoners who had completed their sentence. So the government lawyer is arguing, no, we can't release these people now because we have to wait for a similar release of 16 prisoners from the other side. Can you believe how obnoxious that is? It is just unacceptable. Civilized countries, civilized governments don't talk like this. As fishermen, we were just talking before this panel, there is no government has any business arresting fishermen. They are crossing, firstly, they don't know what the boundaries are. Forget that, there's no maritime demarcation between India and Pakistan. That thing is not there. Okay, but even if you put maritime demarcation, it is not obvious to fishermen who are on the high seas. Yeah, they have some rudimentary aids, but even between India and Sri Lanka, fishermen cannot make out that they are crossing the international boundary. And they go they go all the time. So fishermen will go where there are fish. If there are more fish, 50 meters from what they may or they may not know as the international boundary, they will go there. Because there are no fish here, they'll go there. And nobody has any business arresting fishermen. And if you are arresting fishermen, hundreds of fishermen, on a sort of weekly basis or on a monthly basis, it's a revolving door. If at a single stroke they were to release 483 fishermen today and say, okay, we are releasing all of them, tomorrow there'll be another 400. Why are they doing this jail burrow? Only to keep hostages, only to keep bargaining chips. I release 400 today, you will release 180 tomorrow. We will, announce this as some big goodwill gesture. India, Pakistan will, the media will say it's a breakthrough in relations. It's, some peace has broken out. And, there'll be some little bit of feel good. It's not all that at all. This actually what needs to be said is we will not arrest fishermen anymore. We will educate fishermen. that you cannot come. Well, now what is there between India and Pakistan, India and Sri Lanka? They have, over the last 3-4 years, not 3-4 years, more perhaps, maybe 6 or 7 years, they have come to an agreement that the local communities on either side, that is in northern Sri Lanka and in Tamil Nadu, the fishing communities will sit together and decide that, hey, this fish thing is limited, the catch is limited. We have to somehow see that we don't poach on each other's livelihood. We also need fish, you also need fish. So something has to be done. And the Indian government is actually taking Tamil Nadu fishermen to some other part, like near Andamans and all, and teaching them how to do a different kind of fishery there, so that they don't do this very damaging deep trawler fishery on the Sri Lankan coast. So something like that. I mean, the problems on the western coast, I mean, between around Kutch are slightly different. So maybe it needs to be tailored to that. But what needs to be done is actually to educate the Indian fishermen that, you know, you can't go there because, you know, it's dangerous, or you know, give them some other means of sustaining themselves, sustaining their livelihood. There's fish processing, there's so many other things. So that is what needs to be done. There's another category of fish. There are actually 3 categories of India-Pakistan prisoners. One is fishermen. The second is civilian prisoners. Now, who are these civilian prisoners? Mostly they are, let me say the third is security prisoners. So who are these civilian prisoners? They are basically some guys who will just chase their livestock or something onto the other side, they'll get caught. This happens mostly in Punjab or on the Rajasthan border, or, you know, somewhere there. Or they are smugglers, liquor, livestock, cattle, Now, I have been at a release of prisoners, goodwill gesture on the Pakistani side. They were releasing some fishermen, they were releasing some civilian prisoners and all. And they were all sitting there at Vaga, looking really, you know, I mean, pathetic, poor, just like people who have no means at all. I mean, you can't imagine a well-to-do person there. Like a well-to-do person would have means to talk or buy himself out of that kind of situation very quickly. So these were all really low-income people who were sitting there. One guy told me he knew exact number of days that he had been. He said, I have been in prison 7 years, 10 weeks, and something days. 7 years, 10 months, and 23 days. He had been counting. It was like that. And then he had crossed the border inadvertently. And there had been another prisoner who was a smuggler. He had been there for 23 years. Amazing. I mean, 23 years is not even now for murder also. They don't give 23 years. Sometimes if it's very heinous, they give, but now they give life or death or whatever. But most often for murder, you get released in 12, 7, 15 years. This guy had been there for 23 years. So it's, and you know, again, this was one goodwill gesture from Pakistan. Immediately after this release, India released some 17 prisoners. So, you know, this kind of thing really has to stop. And, you know, we as journalists in the media, we don't write enough about this. We write when somebody like Hamid, with the determination of his mother, with the determination of someone like Jatin, you know, it has been constantly in the media, because I think his mother ensured that she was there at every opportunity. I think you were there even when the Heart of Asia summit was there. Yeah, I remember you held a press conference. You were also there, sir. Yes. And I think you wanted to meet the Sartaj Aziz, and you're not allowed to meet him, I think. Yeah. So she made sure that it was in the media limelight. But in our own papers, in our this story about prisoners is not sexy enough. Like, some guy, as Rajdeep said, a fisherman somewhere, sitting somewhere, and who's in Landi prison in Karachi, he's not important enough for big coverage. Even this Imran Warsi was not a big story. It should have been. He was sitting in a police station for how many months? 10 months. Since March, he was sitting in a police station. His sentence was over, and there was no place to keep him, so they kept him in a police station. Beyond obnoxious, actually. So, we as people, and what gives me hope is actually this Hamid's release was not, there was some, obviously government, in the end, the government has to take the final step. But the kind of pressure, pressure that activists brought about on both sides gives me hope that, we can actually take, there are small steps that can be achieved between the two countries if enough people, whip it up a bit. And this case is a classic example. Even Kartarpur at a level is because of the demand by Sikhs. I think Pakistan was astute enough to respond to that demand on a very important year for Sikhs. And I think India was also practical and pragmatic enough not to deny the Sikhs on this side access to the corridor and say, yes, both sides should actually do this. So it gives me hope that people can actually, I used to think, what can people do when both sides are so cussed and bloody-minded about, relations with, about their relations with each other. And these two, in fact, have given me hope that there is a role for citizens to play. And I think as citizens, we need to talk about this more. We need to raise this more. We need to stop internalizing the language of, this failed bilateral relationship. We need to stop saying things like this is a humanitarian gesture. We need to call out the violation in Hamid Ansari's case, and in Imran Warsi's case, and in Sama's case, and in every case, we need to call it out as violation of local laws, national laws, as well as international laws. No civilized country should be doing this. And India calls itself a democracy. Pakistan also calls itself a democracy, and liberal democracy. In India, we should not. People who people should be taking this up more regularly and more strongly and stridently. And I can only say that as a journalist, I have been writing about it, and I will continue to write about it, and I hope more people will take it up. I think I had one more point to make. Yeah, the other thing is about security prisoners. Security prisoners truly can be treated as hostages. I have no problem when they're treated as hostages. You can actually trade them. You can trade them secretly. So if the Jadhav case had not really blown up into the public eye, India and Pakistan could have actually, because both countries spy on each other, there are spies on both sides, we have their spies, they have our spies. So there is a possibility that, when you have a person like that, you can actually trade him off for somebody. So that is acceptable. You treat security prisoners as hostages, that's fine. It's done all over the world. During the Cold War, US and the USSR exchanged such spies. It's happened recently also. So there's, that is quite done and normal. And the other thing, I just wanted to make mention of Sarab Jeath, who was there. His was the most, I was there when actually the Pakistan government spoke about releasing him. It was a newly elected PPP government, It took power in April. Nawaz Sharif was also in coalition with that government, and the previous outgoing government had said that he would hang. The new government came in, and they said they reversed that decision. They said no, they didn't reverse it. They put a stay on it. They managed to stay on it, and then they also said that later on they said there will be no hangings anymore in Pakistan. And I saw that case unravel, and it became a hostage. He became a hostage to India, to the steadily deteriorating India-Pakistan relations. He could have been released had Mumbai not happened. Mumbai happened, our ties went for a toss, and then there was no way he was going to be released. And finally they said he died of a heart attack, but actually he had been attacked in prison. He had been attacked, and he died soon after that attack. So it is, when you talk about hostages, Sarab Jeath actually epitomizes that hostage situation. He was truly a hostage to India-Pakistan relations. So with that, I will end. Thank you.